Welcome to Daily English Stories. Every story hides a world. Some inspire, some haunt, some stay forever. Chapter 1. Two Fathers, Two Worlds. Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii, a place where the sun touched the ocean every evening as if promising that every ending could become a new beginning. He was just a young boy then, unaware that his childhood would become the foundation of lessons that would one day change how millions of people think about money. But even as a child, Robert noticed something unusual about his world. He had not one father, but two. His real father was a highly educated man, a school teacher who believed in the power of formal education. To him, the path to success was clear: study hard, get good grades, secure a safe job, and work diligently for a steady paycheck. He was kind, thoughtful, and deeply committed to his family. Yet, despite his intelligence and dedication, money always seemed to slip through his fingers. The bills piled up faster than his income, and financial security was always a distant dream. His second father, his best friend, Mike's dad, was very different. This man never finished high school, yet he owned businesses, real estate, and investments that brought him steady wealth. He was practical, confident, and unafraid of taking risks. He didn't talk about getting a job. He talked about creating jobs. He didn't believe in working for money. He believed money should work for him. Robert was only 9 when he realized that both men loved him, but they were guiding him toward two completely different worlds. One world valued security, education, and status. The other valued courage, independence, and financial intelligence. At first, it was confusing. How could both be right? His real father would say, "Go to school, Robert. Study hard so you can work for a good company." But his rich dad would smile and say, "Learn how money works, Robert, so you can own the company." Robert began to notice the difference not just in words, but in lifestyles. His poor dad talked about saving money, but was often worried about bills. His rich dad talked about investing money and seemed to have more time, freedom, and confidence. The turning point came one afternoon when Robert overheard his real father saying, "I can't afford it." Those words sounded normal to him until he visited his rich dad's home. When Mike asked his father for something expensive, rich dad didn't say, "I can't afford it." Instead, he asked, "How can we afford it?" That single difference in question changed Robert's understanding forever. One statement shut down possibility. The other opened the door to creativity. Poor Dad taught Robert to avoid risk. Rich Dad taught him to manage it. Poor Dad said, "The love of money is the root of all evil." Rich Dad said, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." Robert began spending more time with Rich Dad, asking endless questions about business, investing, and how money truly worked. Instead of giving him easy answers, Rich Dad would make him think. He'd say, "Don't just work for money, Robert. Learn how to make money work for you." Those lessons weren't always easy. Rich Dad made Robert and Mike help around his small convenience store without pay. When Robert complained, Rich Dad smiled and said, "The moment you work for money, you become its slave." Learn to see what others don't. Opportunities. Robert's young mind was being shaped in two directions: security versus freedom, fear versus courage. One father wanted him to climb the corporate ladder. The other wanted him to build his own. And slowly, Robert began to understand something powerful. Both men were intelligent. Both cared deeply. But their financial destinies were not determined by their income. They were determined by their mindset. In that moment, standing between two fathers, two homes, and two philosophies, Robert Kiyosaki made a quiet promise to himself. He would listen, he would learn, but he would think for himself. He would discover which path truly led to freedom. Because in life, he realized, it's not the money that makes you rich. It's the way you think about it. Chapter 2. Escaping the Rat Race. It was a warm Saturday morning when Robert and his friend Mike arrived at Rich Dad's office. The air smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and ambition. Rich Dad was already there, looking over a stack of documents. When he saw them, he smiled. Not the gentle smile of a teacher, but the confident grin of someone who knew exactly what lesson life was about to teach. "Boys," he began, "today I'm going to show you why most people spend their whole lives working hard, yet never get ahead." Robert and Mike exchanged curious glances. They were just kids, eager to learn how to make money. But Rich Dad's tone carried something deeper, almost like he was about to reveal a secret hidden in plain sight. He drew a small circle on a notepad and said, "This is the rat race. It's where most people live their entire lives." He continued sketching small arrows going round and round inside the circle. People wake up, go to work, pay their bills, and repeat every month, every year, believing that working harder will eventually set them free. But it never does. They run faster, yet remain in the same place. Robert leaned closer, intrigued. "Why, Rich Dad, why can't they get out?" Rich Dad smiled gently. "Because they're running after money instead of making money run after them." He stood up and began pacing slowly. "Most people think that a higher salary will solve their problems. But when they earn more, they spend more. They buy a bigger house, a new car, better clothes, and soon their expenses rise to match their income. It's a cycle of dependency. The more they earn, the more they owe." Robert could almost see his real father in that description. Always busy, always tired, always waiting for the next paycheck. "Poor people and middle-class people," Rich Dad continued, "work for money. The rich make money, work for them." He drew two columns on the notepad, one labeled assets, the other liabilities. "An asset puts money in your pocket," he said, tapping the paper. "A liability takes money out. Most people can't tell the difference. They think their home is an asset, but it's not, if it costs them money every month." Robert frowned. "So, what should we do?" Rich Dad smiled. "Buy assets. Businesses, real estate, stocks, intellectual property, things that generate income even when you're asleep. The poor buy luxuries first. The rich build assets first and let their assets pay for luxuries later." The words felt like lightning in Robert's young mind. It was a completely new way of seeing the world, and one that made the difference between freedom and lifelong struggle. "Financial freedom," Rich Dad said softly, "isn't about having a lot of money. It's about understanding money." He explained how schools taught students to become good employees, not good thinkers. "Schools teach you to remember facts," he said, "but life rewards you for solving problems. The world doesn't pay for your degrees, it pays for your ideas." Robert sat in silence, his thoughts racing. He remembered how his real father, the poor dad, always said that getting a stable job was the key to safety. But here was another man, successful and calm, saying that safety was an illusion. Over time, Rich Dad began giving the boys small challenges. He made them identify opportunities, understand businesses, and observe how people made and lost money. Sometimes they failed miserably, but every failure carried a lesson. Failure, Rich Dad said, is how you pay tuition in the real world. Robert began noticing how money moved, how people earned it, spent it, borrowed it, and wasted it. He saw that most adults were trapped not by lack of money, but by lack of knowledge. They worked for fear of losing their jobs, fear of losing their homes, fear of losing status. Fear ruled their lives. Rich Dad taught him to look beyond that fear, to see money not as a master, but as a tool. Money, he said, is like fire. If you don't control it, it will burn you, but if you learn to use it, it will cook your meal, warm your home, and light your world. That day, as Robert left Rich Dad's office, the sun was setting, golden light reflecting off the ocean. But inside him, another light had just been lit, the light of understanding. He finally saw what Rich Dad had been teaching all along. The real trap was not poverty. It was ignorance, and the way out was not more work. It was more wisdom. Robert promised himself that he would never run in circles again. He would learn how money worked, and one day teach others how to escape the rat race, just as he had begun to do. Because true freedom, he realized, isn't earned through labor. It's earned through learning. Chapter 3. The Mindset of the Rich. As Robert grew older, his lessons with Rich Dad shifted from numbers and charts to something far more profound: mindset. Rich Dad often said, "Money doesn't make you rich. Your mind does." At first, Robert didn't fully understand, but over time, those words began to shape the foundation of his life. One afternoon, while sitting across from Rich Dad in his small office overlooking the busy streets of Honolulu, Robert asked, "What's the biggest difference between the rich and the poor?" Rich Dad leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Simple," he said. "The poor and middle class work for money. The rich let money work for them. But the real difference lies here." He pointed to his head. "In the way they think." Robert listened closely as Rich Dad explained that money was just an idea, a reflection of the thoughts guiding your choices. "If you believe you can't afford something," Rich Dad said, "your mind stops working. But if you ask, 'How can I afford it?' your mind starts finding answers. Wealth begins in your thinking." He spoke about the two biggest enemies of financial freedom: fear and greed. Fear keeps people poor, he said. They're afraid of losing, afraid of risk, afraid of change. So they cling to security, even if that security keeps them trapped. Robert thought of his real father, his poor dad, a man of principles, hard work, and education, yet always worried about bills and retirement. He realized how fear had quietly guided so many of his father's choices. "Then there's greed," Rich Dad continued. "Greed makes people chase money for the wrong reasons. They see others succeed and want what they have, not because they love the work, but because they want more. The rich learn to manage both emotions. They use fear to prepare and greed to drive, but never let either control their actions." Robert sat silently, absorbing every word. The lesson wasn't about earning, it was about being. Over the next few years, Rich Dad taught him how to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. He made him study markets, learn business structures, and most importantly, observe how people reacted to money. "You'll find that emotions make people predictable, he said. When everyone's afraid, opportunities are everywhere. When everyone's greedy, danger is near. One day, Robert lost a small investment he had made. It felt devastating. He was angry, embarrassed, and ready to quit. But Rich Dad simply smiled. "Good," he said. "Now you've paid your tuition." "My tuition?" Robert asked, confused. "Of course," Rich Dad replied. "You've just bought yourself a valuable lesson. The poor avoid mistakes. The rich learn from them. Every failure brings you closer to wisdom, and wisdom is worth more than gold." It took Robert years to fully understand that wealth was not built in numbers, but in habits, in the quiet, unseen choices made each day. Rich Dad often reminded him, "The rich don't spend to look rich, they invest to become rich." He taught Robert the importance of discipline, living below his means, saving strategically, and letting his money grow through investments rather than consumption. "You must master your emotions," he said, "or they will master you." Robert learned that wealth wasn't about luck or inheritance. It was about patience and persistence. The poor wanted quick results. The rich understood time. They let their money compound, their ideas mature, and their decisions ripen. But perhaps the greatest lesson came one quiet evening when Rich Dad said, "True wealth isn't measured by how much you have, but by how much you can give." Robert looked at him, puzzled. Rich Dad continued, "If your money only serves you, it will never make you happy. But when it helps others, when it creates jobs, solves problems, or changes lives, that's when you understand its real purpose." In that moment, Robert realized that Rich Dad's secret wasn't just about money. It was about freedom, the freedom to live on your own terms, to wake up each day doing what you love, to give without fear of running out. Years later, when Robert became a successful entrepreneur and author, he looked back on those lessons with deep gratitude. He knew his true inheritance wasn't wealth, it was wisdom. Rich Dad had given him the greatest gift a teacher could offer, the mindset to create, grow, and share prosperity. And so, Robert Kiyosaki's story ends not with riches counted in dollars, but with a truth that echoes far beyond money. Riches begin in the mind. Freedom begins in the heart. And the richest people are those who learn, grow, and give.